Thank you so much for that, Sinafik. I feel like what you said has a lot of information. Like, if you really think about it, it's a lot of like key insights that you have shared. I would say, like, if I heard what you said when I was starting out my college journey, I feel like I would have benefited so much and made a lot more experiences out of the opportunity that was given to me. Just a note on networking, though. I feel like that has been a buzzword for such a long time, and the more I talk to people about networking, I realize that people are just so scared of the word networking itself, not even like the process of networking, because a lot of people, it could seem like, I think it also has a cultural element to it. Like, going up to someone, talking about yourself can feel like, you know, you're full of yourself or selling yourself. So not a lot of people are comfortable with that idea of like showing up for yourself and like, you know, presenting yourself in a certain manner to someone else just to get a job, quote unquote. And so I think a lot of international students, including myself, like, I've had a hard time trying to, you know, be an advocate for myself and be like, okay, yeah, these are my qualifications. These are, you know, why I'm good at these things. And that's why I'm going to talk to this person who might, you know, might not end up in giving me a job, but at least we can have a connection that might lead to something else, right? So I think being comfortable with speaking about yourself, being confident in that is also like, when I say cultural, it's like, you know, because we grew up in Ethiopia and there's a certain level of like some, you know, social norms that we've accustomed to. But I think for me, I mean, for us per se, because I went to Nazareth school, that's one of the things that I always talk about, is it made me really confident regardless of where the space I was in. And so I never, like, you know, felt like, oh, I'm taking up too much space, or like, oh, I shouldn't like share my opinion here or something like that. So I'm really, really grateful for that experience, because it gave me the confidence that I needed to navigate any environment, even though there are people that do not look like me. And so I feel like, but some people might not relate to that. And so that could be an inhibitor in their experience of networking, right? Because sometimes people are not comfortable with just like, why should I like, you know, share someone else just so that they could give me a job? Like, it just sounds like, it just sounds weird, you know, like you're selling yourself. But then in the US, that's how the system works. Like, that's just how things are. And it might not be the same back home in Ethiopia, but I mean, connections, like anywhere in the world, like getting a job, you know, like knowing people, it's like the basis of how people get their jobs. So I just wanted to make a comment about like networking there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a word that needs a lot of demystifying.
Yeah, exactly.
And but I think that's why people should think about it as relationship building. And with relationship building, the first part is being authentic to yourself, right? Because
100%.
there are people who do not feel comfortable just going into, you know, a structured setting and just like talking to people that they don't know, right? And there are other people where it comes so naturally to them and that's all that they want to do. So try to think about your profile, what feels comfortable to you. But I think we also don't, that's why I said earlier, diversify your network, because a simple example would be, you know, you mentioned being from Nazareth school, right? I'm also from Nazareth school, and there have been so many people that I have just met, and they could be from different years. And now, whenever I meet Nazareth students, they probably recently graduated, so I don't want to mention when I graduated. I'll just be like, oh, you know, I was probably a couple years older than you. We didn't cross paths, so I try to avoid graduation years because these youngins are young.
They're so young.
But and sometimes we have the best conversations even before we find out that we are from Nazareth, and then suddenly we're like, oh my God, are you from Nazareth school, right? So all of this to say is sometimes you are in spaces where you make connections with people and there's a commonality somewhere. Maybe it's where you're from, maybe it's an interest, and the relationship feels organic. And networking, I think we should also stop thinking of networking as an ad hoc thing, like a situational thing where you're going to see the immediate fruit of your labor. No, it's a relationship building. It is a long-term game, because these people that you have in your network are so essential. And I don't want to make it sound transactional, but at the end of the day, you know, we're in we're in a social environment, we're going to need something from each other, and we have to be ready to be of service to each other. I can tell you, for me personally, you know, I've been doing a terrible job of that, if anybody that works where I work is listening, but there are a lot of social events now because, you know, we're trying to get back into the office, and sometimes your schedule is so insane that you don't go. But, you know, my job requires a lot of interaction with vendors. I negotiate. I'm in the insurance market. And then somebody was talking about, you know, sometimes, you know, we can be, you know, we have actuaries that look at numbers and that, you know, we can try to say, you know, increase this or decrease this. But there's nothing like picking up the phone and calling someone that you know and say, hey, like, this is what I'm trying to solve for, right? And for you to pick up the phone, that connection needs to be saved in your phone. And for you to make that ask, there should be a baseline relationship that's been built. And that unfortunately takes work, but it can be work that feels authentic to you, so that you don't feel like you're playing a role.
Right.
And Yup alone, I think the one thing about Yup that I can't speak enough about is Yup has given me some of the most transformative relationships I've ever had, as mentors, as professional contacts. A lot of skill sets that I've honed because of the people that I met through Yup. And these people I met just by attending an event, you know?
Right.
So there's that work, there's magic in the work that you're avoiding. I heard that recently on TikTok, so I won't take credit for it. I was going to, but I was like, you know what, it sounds too good, it doesn't lie. So I hear you. And then the two other things, because I have 7 tips in total, so I want to kind of weave it into our conversation so that it doesn't feel so the 2 more, and then I'll be quiet.
No.
The other one is always upskill. Keep up with the market. And skills like networking, skills are diverse. Skills are not always technical. Skills are just things that you can bring with you when you show up to the table and show up as your whole self, because you're belonging. I'm trying to kind of like tie in everything that I have been talking about so far, but I think it's very, very important. So this goes back to tapping into the resources that I said, but beat the market. And I work in benefits, so I deal a lot with trends in recruiting and attracting and retaining talent. And even in the US alone, you will see how the market has evolved in the last 2 years, right? Because COVID happened, right? Some industries started booming, some industries started dying. And then now you have the economy, you have the trickle-down effect of inflation, technology, opportunities that were hot a year ago now. That industry is consolidating. You hear about a lot of layoffs. And then the industries that were struggling during COVID now, because there's return to work, there's a lot of activity in the cities, those are starting to come back up. So it's always important to diversify your skill set, because you never know. And when you're an international student or a foreign national, losing your job can be especially debilitating, because sometimes your job is tied to your immigration status, you know. And I just remember, you know, and again, I'm fortunate enough to have gotten to a point in my career where I have a sense of job stability, but there were times during the pandemic, you know, I would laugh about it, but I'd be like, if I lost my job, I'm on an H-1B, I would, and then it sounded funny at the time, but then when you think about the ramifications, it's, again, it goes back to the scarcity mindset, right? Because until you get that permanent status, you're temporary, and things could change. You could be at the peak of your career, and then the next day the company goes bankrupt, and then you're an employee, right? Sometimes we feel so connected to our jobs, and they feel emotionally fulfilling if they do, which is great. But at the end of the day, it's a contract. It's a contract between a company and you. And if terms of the contract change, that contract is null and void. So always upskill, always keep up with the market, be as savvy as you can about your industry, always keep up for trends. It could be certificates that are accessible on Google. You know, you don't even have to pay much in subscription, but you can get a certificate that you can highlight as a skill. That way, when you need to pivot and shift to the next thing, you're coming with a lot on the table. And then the next one, before I want you to react to this too. The next one is it is so important to define what success means to you. And this goes back to what I said about authenticity. I think international students, we're not a monolith. And sometimes when we try to be a resource for one another, I think we inadvertently end up setting the tone of like, oh, this is what you should do to be successful, that there's just one path, just because I, went into the insurance industry and it worked out for me. And then when I give advice to somebody else, like, because I'm talking about my experience, which is all that I can kind of frame for my advice, I'm setting the tone of like, oh, you should do this. But I think everybody needs to have a constant dialogue internally, and they can tap into external things that give them reference, that give them inspiration, because a lot of times it's also okay for you to graduate and say, no idea what it is I wanted to do. Because funny story, and I was telling this to a colleague yesterday, is I ended up applying to my first job in the industry that I'm still in because I was a biology major. I knew I didn't want to do med school. I knew I wanted to be in the public health realm in subcapacity because I took a health policy class and I liked it. But again, international student, right? I'm on the clock, so I was just applying to jobs everywhere, right? Even if it's not aligned with what I want to do, I'm like sending resumes. And then there was a job posting for health and group benefits analyst. I saw the word health. I applied. And what I thought my job was and what it ended up being, when I tell you the lack of alignment, it was not what I expected at all. Because we're essentially, it's HR consulting. We're dealing in insurance where it was so different. And that's the only reason that I fell into this industry, because I saw the word health and then I applied. So
wow, that's crazy.
Again, it's you get into this just reactive timeline of like, I'm just gonna do this because I have all of these different things that I need to sort out, immigration being like 90% of it. So I think it's important for you as an international student to pause and say, what is success to me? And try, I know I hate it when you're like, I work on grant applications sometimes and they ask you like set measurable targets, and I'm like, I hate it. But unfortunately you need to define what success is to you through measurable metrics, so that you can track progress, so that you could look back and say, oh, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, and then you can shift. It always helps me to have things on paper. So at the beginning of every year, I always ask myself, you know what, at the end of the year, what would success mean to me at my job? Is it getting a promotion? Is it getting an X amount of bump in my salary? Is it venturing into the specialty field? That way, if you put it on paper, you can also get out of this fog of I feel like a lot of people around me too, sometimes you're in this fog of, am I where I need to be? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And again, for international students, there's already a dichotomy of that. Am I supposed to be there? Am I supposed to be here? There's already that. But sometimes you're in this fog of not feeling like you're doing enough. So I think that's why it's important to have a marker of success. That way you can keep yourself accountable and say, hey, wait a minute, this is what I told myself success was. This is what I'm working towards. So I am not going to use this invisible metric that I don't even have language around to beat myself up because I'm not doing something different. So I think it's important to put language around it, to push yourself. And yeah, so it's like, it's important. What is success to you, I think is a very big part of that equation.
Yeah. No, completely agree. Oh my God, this is like such a gem. Like, honestly, thank you so much for like sharing all of this, Sinafik. This is like very, very helpful. Just to like comment on a few things that you said, it's about like diversifying the people that you interact with. Sometimes as international students, and I've noticed this a lot, we tend to stick with our group, whether it is Ethiopians, whether it is, we're just like, you wake up one day and the people you're closest to are international. So I feel like that's what I did when I was an undergrad. But then there's also this level of branching out your network, like you never know the amount of knowledge that you're going to get, the amount of experiences that you're going to get just by simply being friends or connecting with someone who's completely different from you, like, and they can be a domestic student too, and you can like make really meaningful connections with them too. And that's also something that I've noticed. But there is also a reason why like international students tend to stick for themselves. It's because, you know, survival, and for sure because, you know, you need your community to survive in that kind of environment. So at times I feel like, okay, I kind of understand why we do that, but at the same time it should not deter from making connections with other people. And that's also something that I completely agree with. And then when you talked about like success, what does success mean to me? And this is like something that I've always, people would, you know, ask me about, okay, so, you know, what's your experience as an international student? So you know, what does it mean to you, you know, to be successful? And I feel like even through my conversations with my friends and the people that I know, whenever I give advice or like whenever I receive advice, I always try to say that this is based off of my experience and it doesn't have to look the same for you. I think that's a very, very important point, because for someone who's looking to go to college from Ethiopia or like from somewhere international, they might have this assumption that like success is linear and you just have to, like, you know, if someone did it that way, like that's the only possible way to become successful. And I don't subscribe to that, because even while a lot of the Ethiopians were like studying biochemistry, and that was like the thing to do. And I was like, I'm not interested in it. So it took a while for me to be like, no, I'm not doing that just because everyone else is doing it, you know? So like being comfortable with like navigating your own path as an international student, and just like taking things with a great, because, you know, your experience is something does not mean that I could also have the same experience, but also like being comfortable with drawing my own journey and navigating my own path. I think that has also really helped me out so far. And like putting, I love that you said that, because I feel like I'm someone who also like likes to do things, just like seeing the progress and having a goal for the year and stuff like that, that I really, really believe that would be helpful. Because or else you would just be, you know, going with the flow and like doing things that people are going, then in the middle you're like, where am I, hold on, like what's happening? So like having that really honest conversation with yourself as to like what you actually want to do, because at the end of the day, if you're not happy with what you're doing, you're not going to be successful, right? Like from what you said, like because you love your job, because you enjoy thoroughly what you're doing, that's why you're successful. And I've never met anyone who's successful and like miserable at their job, like, oh, I hate this, but then, you know. So like I think really thinking about that is helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think authenticity is very important, and I think sometimes and coming from the community that we're from, you know, I love how you said biochemistry. I think I ended up studying biology because
Yeah.
I was just kind of stuck in the, oh, I'm a natural science student, like
Right.
that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
But now looking back, if I could go back and talk to college Sinafik, oh
Yeah.
my God, we would have made so many different choices. But I think, you know, we come here still very, very young. You know, I think because we're not babies, we think we're adults or semi-adults,
Yeah.
but we are really, really young. We're our brain is still developing,
Yeah.
and I think we look externally for agency. Like we're looking for people, institutions to tell us like this is what you need to do. And I think, and some people unfortunately, I think they don't stop that search.
Yeah.
And what I'll say is you need to give yourself agency first. I think that's the biggest part. Like you need to be able to tell yourself, this is what I want to do, and it feels very different than what anybody around me has done. And you know, sometimes families, parents, that dynamic I know is also very intricate, right? Like there are parents that give a lot of liberty for kids to do whatever, and there are some that are very vocal about like, don't do that, do this. And I don't want to take away from the challenges of even navigating that, but I do think at the end of the day, going back to what does success mean to you, and I think for a lot of people, at least I hope it is, it should be living a life that feels good to you first and foremost. So how do you go about getting that? And I think And I'm glad that what I said about putting things on paper resonated with you, because I think for me, I'm also someone who, you know, I'm engaged in a lot of different things, right? You know, I'm employed at Lockton. I'm a part of YEP, and then there are other ventures like Birara Genet that I'm still heavily involved with, and a lot of times when you're involved in different things, it's so easy for you to get into that fog, because you can't be giving 150% to everything, right? So you have to be very intentional about what you give and what you don't give. And I'm someone who, it doesn't take much for me to beat myself up. I walk away from any situation feeling like, oh, I could have done more, you know, oh man, I should have. And I'm sure there's novelty in challenging yourself, but I think it's so important to keep yourself accountable when you make yourself feel bad. I think, just like, you know, if you know, in this conversation, if you said something, and like, if you insulted me, if you were disrespectful, right? A lot of times it's very easy for us to flag, and I would respond back. But when it's happening internally, we don't do a good job of isolating the negative self-talk, right? So I think putting things on paper, you know, because sometimes I would ask myself, am I not doing enough as YEP's executive director? But, you know, I go back to that paper, and then I say, what was success to me as executive director, right? And I look at that. It's like, if I didn't do any of those things, maybe there's merit in what I'm feeling. But if I'm using this new metric that I didn't put on myself, then now it needs to be a different dialogue. So that's really helped me, not just in terms of goal setting, but also keeping myself accountable when it comes to negative self-talk. And I know a lot of people struggle from that too. And I think that's a natural extension to my final tip. Is challenge yourself and give yourself a lot of grace at the same time. I see people doing more of one than the other, and I do feel like it needs to be a delicate balancing act, because I talked a lot about, you know, wanting to challenge my younger self in all the ways that I feel like she didn't challenge herself, right? So I've kind of zoned in on, you know, what I've done to get to where I am now and what I need to do to get to where I want to be. But it is also so important to be your biggest advocate, because I think if the international student journey does one thing to us, and even if, you know, you have your people, you have your base, you have the people that you stick with for survival, at the end of the day, you are on your own. Especially a country like the US, it definitely solidifies that mentality in everything that you do, whether it's the educational institutions, whether it's the professional pathways, you know, whether it's corporate, non-corporate. It is onus is on you to show up. Onus is on you to figure out your finances. Onus is on you, unfortunately, to figure out your immigration. It is you. So it is so important that you have the kindest relationship with yourself. It is important that you show up for you. What you said earlier about not being enough, I have not felt enough for this country. I have not felt enough for Ethiopia at some point in my life, but and not to say I'm there yet, but I'm very intentional about being enough for me and where I'm at, where my feet are. So give yourself grace. I think that our journees are challenging. If you ask me now, as a non-17-year-old, to pack up, you know, if I hadn't been on a plane before, to pack up and move to the other corner of the world, I would laugh at you. I wouldn't do that. I think about, you know, 17-year-old me, and I think part of it is just she didn't know what she was getting herself into. Again, she was expecting to see Serena Vanderwoodson or whoever the Gossip Girl character is when I landed at Dallas Airport, right? So she had other things that she needed to figure out. But the journeys that we make take a lot of guts. That's why I said we start off big, and sometimes we forget that. We forget that we've already achieved a lot through the journey alone. We've already done big things. So that's why I think some of my commentary is because I want people to go back to that mindset of you can achieve. Like achieving success will come if you aim for it. What does that mean to you is an exercise that only you will complete. And I think there's beauty in that, and there's power in that.
And I love that. Honestly, there's nothing more that I could say to make it any less. I completely agree with everything that you've said, Sinafik. And as we're ending our conversation, I feel like people listening to this episode would resonate with a lot of things that we mentioned so far. And before I end the conversation, any last things to say?
Again, thank you. I really, I don't want it to sound like I'm complimenting it just because we're talking, but I really, it's because we tried to do it and we saw that, you know, even though we were passionate about it, it's just very difficult to carve out time.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate what you're doing. I
Thank
hope
you.
everybody listening is listening with intention and really trying to learn as much from other people's experiences. But again, we're not a monolith, right? There could be a ton of things that I've said today that you're like, oh, I don't agree with that. But again, there's beauty in having that dialogue. And again, what I will say, and I really hope, you know, we're not a for-profit. This is not a business. So sometimes when I talk about it feels salesy, but Your Ethiopian Professionals, especially for people in our community, if you're looking to upskill, if you're looking to attend virtual events, if you are looking, we have a workforce development initiative that we recently launched. If you're in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and you're just looking to meet people socially or in a professional context, or you're based anywhere in the US or even outside, and you want to be part of an organization that's really just catering to our community, I think please follow Your Ethiopian Professionals network. We're on all social media platforms. It's passion work for me, and it's a big part of my life. But again, thank you for giving me the space to even reflect on my experiences. I tried to be intentional about even this dialogue. That's why I had the tips written down, because it has become so important to me to be intentional about everything that I do. And it's because I felt like I lived a good portion of my life just kind of existing, and I'm trying to give back to my younger self. So thank you for giving me the space, and it was also very empowering and powerful hearing about your experience and everything that you're navigated. So I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you so much, Sinafik. I really, really appreciate taking the time to talk to me. I know it's been a while since we planned to do this, and I'm very, very happy we finally did it. And with that, we end a wonderful conversation of the Internationally podcast. Please make sure to go follow the official Instagram page at Internationally by Ruth, that is LIE, and send an email with your questions or concerns about being an international student to internationallybyruth@gmail.com. Thank you again for tuning in today. I hope you have a lovely week ahead of you, and take care of yourselves, everyone. Bye.